What if the anxiety you carry every day isn't yours? It's borrowed from a feed. Behavioral science has confirmed something quietly radical. A digital detox, a deliberate, sustained break from social platforms, produces measurable changes in anxiety, attention span, and self-perception within 72 hours. 3 days. Behavioral science is the systematic study of how environments shape decisions and emotions. It's not self-help, it's measurement. And what researchers have been measuring inside those 72 hours is a nervous system slowly recalibrating itself back to a quieter baseline. According to a Deloitte Global Mobile Consumer Survey, the average adult checks their phone and with it social media roughly 150 times per day. Each check is a small interruption, a context switch the brain must pay for. Over time, that cost compounds into something that feels like chronic, low-grade restlessness, a hum beneath the surface of everything. Social platforms are calibrated deliberately around variable reward. The unpredictable timing of likes, comments, and new content triggers dopamine release in patterns that technology ethicist Tristan Harris has compared directly to slot machine mechanics. The scroll isn't passive. Here's where it gets harder. The first hours of a digital detox don't feel like relief. They feel like withdrawal. Restlessness spikes. The hands reach for a phone that isn't there. The mind, suddenly without its usual input stream, generates its own noise. Within the first 12 hours, anxiety measurably increases for most participants, a finding documented by psychologist Amy Orban and colleagues in their experimental social media restriction studies. The brain scans for the stimulation it's been conditioned to expect. Finding none, it escalates its search signal. This isn't weakness. It's a nervous system doing exactly what it was trained to do. Many people believe they can simply recall who they were before social media. That memory works like a tape recorder, preserving a clean, accurate version of their pre-platform self. Behavioral science corrects this directly. Human memory reconstructs rather than replays. That earlier self is partly a story you're actively rewriting right now. Social platforms function as a continuous comparison engine. Every image, every engagement metric, every curated life becomes an involuntary data point your brain uses to calibrate your own worth. This erosion of self-perception happens quietly, incrementally, and largely beneath your awareness. But pause and ask a question most people never think to ask. Who benefits from the anxiety that comparison generates? Attention is the product. Emotional activation, including anxiety, keeps the scroll moving. The platform's business model and your nervous system's distress are not unrelated. Cognitive neuroscience has mapped what sustained social media use does to attention. The brain adapts to rapid context switching by shortening its tolerance for uninterrupted focus. The capacity to sit with a single thought, unstructured and unhurried, quietly atrophies. It doesn't disappear, but it weakens. At roughly the 24-hour mark, participants in detox studies report peak discomfort. Boredom is acute. The mind generates what psychologist Sandy Mann, who researches boredom at the University of Central Lancashire, describes as intrusive idle thoughts, fragments of unfinished mental business the scroll had been suppressing. This is uncomfortable. It's also the beginning of something. Here's the harder truth. Social media doesn't just distract the mind from boredom. It suppresses a backlog of unprocessed emotion. Grief, loneliness, low-grade dissatisfaction. Content consumption buries these signals under stimulation. When the feed stops, those signals surface. The noise was never entirely from outside. Some of it was always yours. Then, something shifts. Around the 48-hour mark, research published in the Journal of Social and Clinical Psychology by Melissa Hunt and colleagues shows a measurable decline in anxiety scores. The nervous system, no longer receiving rapid-fire stimulation, begins to reset its baseline. The restlessness doesn't vanish, but it softens. There's space between the thoughts now. Attention recovers faster than most researchers initially predicted. Participants report holding focus on a single task for meaningfully longer stretches by day 2. Cognitive neuroscience frames this as the brain's default mode network reasserting itself, the architecture of deep thought quietly rebuilding. Something subtler is also happening. Without the continuous feed of curated images and engagement metrics, the brain's social comparison circuitry loses its fuel. Self-perception begins to stabilize. Participants describe a reduction in what psychologists call upward social comparison, the habit of measuring yourself against an idealized other. By hour 72, the measurable changes are consistent enough that researchers treat this window as a genuine psychological threshold. Anxiety is down, attention is extended, self-perception is more internally grounded. The nervous system hasn't been healed, but it's been given the conditions it needs to begin recalibrating on its own terms. What the brain does with unstructured time is one of the more surprising findings in this research. Left without external input, the mind doesn't idle. It consolidates. It makes unexpected connections. It surfaces creative associations that constant stimulation had crowded out. Psychologist Scott Barry Kaufman's work on self-actualization points directly to this. Depth requires space. But here's the tension. The 72-hour data doesn't resolve. The recalibration is real, and it's temporary if nothing changes afterward. Returning to the same platforms, the same scroll patterns, the same unexamined habits reverses the gains. The window isn't a cure, it's a demonstration of what's possible. Scholar Hazel Rose Marcus spent decades documenting how culture shapes the psychological self, how the environment we inhabit quietly authors our sense of who we are. Social media is now one of the most powerful cultural environments most people move through daily. The Detox arc reveals just how thoroughly it has been authoring you. Martin Seligman, whose PERMA framework identifies positive emotion, engagement, relationships, meaning, and achievement as the pillars of well-being, makes a point that matters here. Flourishing depends on understanding what is actually shaping your daily emotional state. This isn't an argument that social media is purely harmful. It's an argument that you deserve to know what it costs, and to choose with open eyes. Behavioral science as a formal discipline dates to the 1930s, when B.F. Skinner's operant conditioning experiments first mapped how environments shape behavior systematically. That's less than a century of tools applied to questions humans have faced for millennia. What the 72-hour detox data gives us is a rare thing, a measurable before and after of our own minds. Attention isn't infinite. Every context switch costs something. Cognitive neuroscience increasingly frames sustained attention as a resource that depletes and replenishes, much like sleep restores the body. The detox window is, in this framing, not an absence of input. It's a form of cognitive rest that the modern environment rarely permits. Here's the finding that surprises most people. Boredom isn't a problem the detox creates. It's the mechanism through which recovery happens. And here's the twist. Research by Sandy Mann found that boredom increases creative thinking, because a mind seeking stimulation turns inward and starts generating its own. The discomfort isn't a side effect. Consider what thousands of participants described consistently. By day 3, the urge to check hasn't disappeared, but it's lost its urgency. There's a gap, small but real, between the impulse and the action. That gap isn't nothing. In behavioral science, that gap is called agency. The most quietly profound finding is about identity. Participants consistently report that by hour 72, they feel more like themselves, though they struggle to articulate what that means. Behavioral science offers one interpretation. Without the continuous external mirror of social comparison, the internal sense of self becomes the primary reference point again. Hazel Rose Marcus's research reminds us that the self is never formed in isolation. Culture shapes which emotions feel normal, which comparisons feel inevitable, which silences feel threatening. The detox experience isn't universal in its texture, but the underlying nervous system mechanics are. The recalibration is human. The specific discomfort is cultural. Behavioral science is honest about its limits. 72 hours of detox doesn't resolve underlying anxiety disorders. It doesn't address structural loneliness or economic precarity that platforms sometimes temporarily soothe. What it does is remove one layer of amplification, and reveal what was beneath the surface, waiting for attention. Return to the question that opened this. Is the anxiety you carry every day yours, or borrowed from a feed? The honest answer, after 72 hours of data, is both. Some of it is yours. Some of it is a signal your nervous system absorbed from an environment engineered to keep you activated. Knowing which is not a small thing. Behavioral science will keep generating new questions about human experience for as long as humans keep building new environments. The platforms we inhabit daily are among the youngest environments we've ever encountered. The 72-hour detox isn't a final answer. It's one of the first clean experiments we've run on ourselves inside them. Here's what the research actually looks like in a life. Participants in Melissa Hunt's study, who limited social media to 30 minutes per day, not zero, just 30 minutes, showed significant reductions in loneliness and depression within 3 weeks. The threshold isn't abstinence, it's intentionality. A timer on your phone screen settings takes 11 seconds to set. So here's the experiment. Pick a weekend, Friday evening to Monday morning, and leave the feed alone. No deletion required, just 72 hours. At the end, ask yourself one question. What did I think about when nothing was feeding me thoughts? Your answer to that question is more useful data about your own mind than any algorithm will ever give you.